So there was a very different mindset about what people should be contributing to their children's education from a financial standpoint. You know, we were on the cusp of public education is funded by the state. We know we need to support that and add to it, but we don't want to, it's not like we're going to private schools. And I think, you know, that's been a trend that's been changing over time. And we were at the very, very beginning of the trend that parents were willing to contribute a significant amount of money to their children's public education.
We were looking for the icing on the cake. That's what LGEF had done. It had provided programs, while some might call them enrichment and others call them necessary. They weren't funds that were to pay teacher salaries. LGEF did that through the SOS campaign, but that's not really what the foundation was started to do. It was started to do the above and beyond.
And this district has always had a goal of providing for the whole child, not just the academic needs, but also the whole child. And so we kept to that large vision that we had, and many times we asked the foundation for funding in those areas that were outside, may be closely aligned with academic needs, but also would provide those things needed to educate the whole child.
I think the hardest obstacle was educating the parents. You know, the vast majority of the funds came from the parents. And it's amazing how little parents know about public school funding, and I was one of them.
One of their focuses was on teacher grants. And one of the things that we worked on during that time was, in partnership with the district, we worked on shifting that focus to a broader district-wide base of funding, and coordinating with the home and school clubs so that they really took the piece of teacher grants. Because, you know, there was an inherent inequity in that only certain teachers would apply, you know, teachers who felt comfortable doing that or had specifics in mind. So it would not be evenly spread across the district. And we were asking all district parents to contribute, and yet not equally dividing the money.
At the same time, the foundation also knew that home and school clubs were gathering money and were fundraising, and much of that all of that went to individual classroom or school needs.
So we did actually rewrite our mission statement it was during my first year, to it takes a town approach, so that, you know, everyone together benefiting all students in our district. And that was one of the important shifts during that period of time, is to do district-wide programs and not so much the individual school programs.
The understanding was that the foundation was there to support district goals. Its goals were not to be different than the goals of the district. That would have been counterproductive. So all the time that I was here, and I think in previous times too, there was a close alliance between the district, its development of goals, and the development of goals by the foundation. And I thought that was a wonderful strength of that foundation, that it was not a group of people going off in a different direction.
The relationship between the foundation and the district during my time was a close relationship. We worked very collaboratively. It's very easy to work closely when you have fewer members. I mean, we were 5 people who sat around a table and said, here's what we need to accomplish. I'll do this, you do that. You know, we'll work together to accomplish X, Y, Z. And, well, one of the things that bubbled to the top that became very apparent when we sent out our very first survey is that people were quite unhappy with the science program in the district at that point in time. And they felt it was not accomplishing what it should, that kids were not learning the sciences, and the district wasn't providing science education in a way that really enhanced the entire educational program and prepared students to go on to the high school. So as a result of that survey, the district, we reworked the entire science program. And that was the beginning of the FOSS kits, the inquiry-based science, the science resource teacher, all as a result of what the LGEF survey brought to light.
When the first year I was on the board, we had no executive committee. We had no structure in place. Again, LGEF was in a total evolution the years that I was on the board. And when we started out, it was just the president and maybe one other person, the campaign chair or someone else, that would sit down with the superintendent every other week and powwow about the state of affairs. There was no executive committee. The board was half the size, and every time any decision of any sort had to be made by the board, the whole board had to make it. So our meetings ran much longer than 2 hours. It was a very different type of foundation.
And you know, the funding was reversed in those times. We decided on the programs in the spring. So here we are today. It's April. So we would get together in April. It was April, and I think we voted on the programs in May. And then we would have to go and raise the money for it the following year. So the district would need to go into its school year with a promise from the foundation of supporting certain programs and hoping that we would actually be able to fund them, because we always determined what programs we were going to fund before we actually raised the money to fund them. So they went on faith. One of the interesting things that came up during that time was we discussed with the district the issue of evaluating programs that the foundation was funding. Since we were responsible for getting the money for these programs, should we have some responsibility for evaluating the programs and reporting back to the people who donated and provided the funds? And it was a long discussion, and it was ultimately decided that the district is responsible for evaluating programs. They are the education managers. We could give input into that process. We could tell them we no longer want to fund this program if we felt it was not successful. But it really is the district that is responsible for the education of the children. So it was not our job to insert ourselves into that evaluation process. Certainly to give input, but not to be part of that process. So that was an interesting give and take and working together with the district. But we did have quite a good close working relationship at that point in time.
The relationship between the foundation and the district has always been great. Mary Ann Park was superintendent at the time, and Suzanne Boxer-Gassman was the assistant superintendent. And they were very, very responsive to LGEF. They were very accountable to LGEF. There was never a feeling of defensiveness or hide the ball. It was very much full disclosure, total accessibility with any questions we asked, and we asked very hard questions of the district when we wanted to know why they were suggesting that a certain program should be funded, what support did they have for that. Had they done research? Had they done studies? Had they done polls? Where did this come from? Where did this idea come from for a particular program? And how do we know it's going to be well received? And how do we know it can be successfully implemented?
We worked hard. We worked very, very hard. We did everything, and so, but we accomplished a lot in the sense that I'm just going to kind of go on.
Sure.
Because what we ended up doing is getting the first articles in the newspaper about LGEF, being very focused on looking at certain periods of time when we needed to have publicity, talking about what's coming as well as the success, what's happened, what we're doing. So it wasn't just going out for the campaign itself and saying, we need your money, and disappearing. It was following up, creating an actual plan to have publicity throughout the year so that people didn't forget about us. We did the first float. That was really fun. You still have the thermometers at the schools, so we did that. We had our parent campaign, our mailing campaign. We had our phone-a-thon, And we relied on corporate matching grants. And that really was our campaign.
Whatever LGEF decides to fundraise, whether it's $1 million or something different, I don't think participation is going to be high unless this tradition of talking to the parents one-on-one and educating them continues.
The one that sticks out, and I don't know what it is today, but Fisher had a very, very low participation rates. It was in the middle 20s at the highest, 20%. We were always teetering in the 40%. I think Blossom Hill was generally the highest, had the highest participation, maybe over 50%. Like I said, I don't remember the exact percentages.
The mission was to raise vital funds to support the schools, very simply. It was to raise vital funds. During my tenure, the need for vital funds became increasingly more vital. It was during my tenure that the SOS campaign occurred, and that the need for more money than we had historically raised was very pressing.
It's like running a company and you find out all of a sudden that your funds are cut, and you're in a company that you cannot lay off people. We cannot lay off our employees mid-year. Some we, clerical and classified, we can give 30-day notice to, but teachers, the vast majority of our employees cannot be laid off at that time. And we had commitments about class size, about programs that we were funding, and so it was a horrible time. All school districts were struggling. How are we going to make it to the end of the year with funds being cut? So that's when I went to the foundation, because there was no one else. You cannot raise a parcel tax without going to the voters. That takes a long time. And the foundation was the group that was, in my estimation, the only group that could help us.
So that's how SOS was born. We realized that somewhere, some way, somehow, the district was going to have to get funds to save those 13 teachers to pay those salaries. And LGEF, as a board, voted to step up to the plate and assume that role of raising that money in the spring to benefit the district for the following school year. So that was the beginning of LGEF getting the horse back in front of the cart and fundraising the year before the money was actually spent.
We were so lucky to have this group of great people with the organizational skills, the connections that could help us move from a foundation that raised $200,000 to a foundation that raised $1 million in just 6 weeks. So the passion and the energy went into that raising of that money for those teachers.
A crisis situation sometimes is what it needs to get people's attention. And we got people's attention, and we had tremendous support. The parents were fantastic. We had Foundation Tuesdays, which were dinners we had every Tuesday at different restaurants around town, and the restaurants would give back a significant chunk of the money when people went to dine. Every week we were going somewhere different. It was a very strong community effort. Everybody really rallied to save the teachers. And that December in the holiday parade, the Los Gatos Holiday Parade, we walked with the 13 teachers who had been saved. Well, actually, some of us walked and some were on the truck, the district truck. But it was great. I mean, the crowd cheered when the truck went by, and the 13 teachers whose jobs were saved waved to the crowd. And it was, you know, it was a really wonderful thing that everyone felt had been done.
It was an exceptional group of 13 teachers, and they wore pink dresses because they had pink slips indicating that they were going to be laid off.
So much of it is a grassroots effort. You know, it's friends telling their friends. It's friends saying, I'm supporting this, are you? And if the answer is no, then find out why and try to get an answer. You know, we had class reps through our campaign, and the class reps sort of served that purpose because they were the parents in the classroom who knew the other parents. For the first time during SOS in the following year, our participation was so high, higher than it had ever been when we were only raising $150,000 to $180,000. And the reason it was so high was the effective role of school captains and class representatives in every single class, talking one-on-one with parents and saying, I'm supporting the foundation. Are you? Have you given your money? If so, great. If not, why not?
You know, we raised $1 million in 6 weeks. And to do that takes a great deal of energy, organization, passion, a great group of people. There were just a great group of people who came together.
If we want to really be a world-class school, if we want to give our kids the global tools to compete with kids that are being educated abroad, we're going to have to do even more than what we're doing. Hence the birth of E Squared, which also happened during the time I was on the board, and this whole concept of excellence in education.
I remember Terry Kent and I had a conversation, and I said, you know, candidly, I was shocked when I came to this district that the foundation only raised $200,000, because I had been in other districts with lesser kinds of socioeconomic conditions, and they raised that or more. And so she and I both agreed that the foundation probably needed to push a little further.
The following year, the Business Partners Program began. And that was the following year, the year I was president, 2003, 2004. We had a realization that realtors were capitalizing on the fact that Los Gatos had these outstanding schools, that other businesses were capitalizing on the fact that everyone wanted to live in Los Gatos because we had fantastic schools, yet they weren't really incurring the cost. The cost was being borne by the parents. And so we thought a good way, perhaps, to get the community, the business community, and the community at large to support the foundation and to support the district, our schools, you know, in a year that wasn't the SOS crisis, was through the Business Partners Program. And that became a very exciting addition of revenue, and it brought the business community in.
Another outgrowth of the SOS campaign in 2003 was the Education and Excellence in Education initiative, the E Squared. And so the plan was, let's decrease the foundation's funding of those teachers, and then over time the foundation can help us fund any initiatives that come out of E Squared.
SOS was the beginning of the $1 Million campaign, and the foundation realized after SOS that if these funds were going to continue to be needed by the district, which they were, we were going to have to build a machine to be able to raise that kind of money. So in 2003, 2004, we restructured the board. We developed an executive committee. We developed a format, if you will, for being able to raise $1 million year after year after year. It has continued 2003 and 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7. You know, here we are, you know, moving on into 7, 8 this next year. And I guess the schools have, with the bond money, have become so beautified. And through LGEF and parcel tax, they have been so enriched with their programs that I'm sure a lot of parents are looking now at the schools and saying, well, why do we still need to give this money? You know, look how beautiful our schools are. Look at these wonderful programs our kids have. This is great. They don't need our money. We don't have to give any more. But what they don't realize is that when the money stops, the programs stop. The beautiful buildings will still be there because the bond funds provided those schools, and the bond funds are spent only for that purpose, and once the construction's finished, that's over. But the ongoing needs of teacher salaries and programs has to come still on into the future from whatever source there is, parcel tax and LGEF, and also home and school clubs. I mean, they partner together. And so I think that SOS and the $1 Million campaigns that followed have paved the way for our kids having excellent programs and excellent opportunities, but they won't continue if we don't have a parcel tax, and if we don't have LGEF, and if we don't have home and school clubs. They all three together are three key components that fund the big chunk of money that our state does not give our public schools.